Hello, Mount Calvary, and welcome to your Thursday daily devotional. I'm Vicar Tim, and we're continuing our walk through the book of Judges today with Judges chapter 14, where Samson begins to tell us a little bit about who he is as a person. He's not yet officially a judge, but today is an interesting story. So let's get into it. We don't need much background. We left off with his parents being made the promise by Jesus Christ. And then that last verse, the Spirit grew in him and continued to work in him. And then we have Samson as an adult in chapter 14. So let's go through it and begin to dig in. So when Samson went to Timnah, he saw a young Philistine woman. He went home and told his father and mother, "I've seen a Philistine woman at Timnah. Now get her for me so that I can marry her." His father and mother asked him, "Aren't there any women among our relatives or all our people? Do you have to marry a woman from those godless Philistines?" But Samson told his father, "Get her for me. She's the one I want." His father and mother didn't know that the Lord was behind this. The Lord was looking for an opportunity to do something to the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines were ruling Israel. So let's stop there. We have kind of the setting for this chapter. Samson goes to Timnah. He sees a beautiful woman, a young Philistine woman, and he wants her to be his wife. And this is a problem. It's not directly prohibited in the Torah, but it's a problem. Because she is not of Israel. She's a foreigner. Not only is she a foreigner with false gods, she's a foreigner who's oppressing his people. And so his father and mother say, "Isn't there a nice Jewish girl here you can marry instead? Maybe a cousin or a second cousin." Laws were a little different. And he says, "No, I want her. Go get her for me." And then we're informed that the Lord's behind it. God is working through Samson in this account to make something happen to the Philistines. So let's keep going in verse 5. So Samson went with his father and mother to Timnah. When they were coming to the vineyards of Timnah, a young roaring lion met Samson. The Lord's Spirit came over him. With his bare hands, he tore the lion apart as if it were a young goat. He didn't tell his parents what he had done. So now we see Samson's beginning to be an interesting character. He takes a lion and tears it apart like a goat because the Spirit is upon him. The Spirit is working in him, giving him a gift of strength, of physical strength. So let's keep going. Then he went to talk to the young woman. She was the one he wanted. Later he went back to marry her. On his way he left the road to look at the lion he had killed. He saw a swarm of bees and some honey in the lion's dead body. He scraped the honey into his hands and ate it as he walked along. When he came to his father and mother, he gave them some of the honey to eat. He didn't tell them he had scraped it out of the lion's dead body. So we have this interesting account where first Samson kills this lion, and then he comes back and he finds honey in it. And he scrapes it and he eats it. And this is against the law of God. This was unclean food. It came from a rotting corpse of an animal that was not a part of kosher. And so it's important he doesn't tell his parents where it came from because he's kind of showing who he is as Samson. And Samson is a hero of the Bible, and yet he's a lot like David, where we're going to see he has some character flaws. And his honesty is honestly part of it. Here he is choosing knowingly to withhold information that is important to his parents. So we begin to see a little bit more about who God has chosen to be his judge, to begin to free Israel from Philistine. Palestine is not in Judges. Philistine is. Let's go from verse 10. After his father went to see the woman, Samson threw a party. He threw the wedding. This is what young men used to do. When her family saw him, they chose 30 of their friends to be with him. And Samson said to them, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you solve it during the 7 days of the party, I'll give you 30 linen shirts and 30 changes of clothes. But if you can't solve it, you will give me the same things." So he's a little cocky. They responded, "Tell us your riddle, let's hear it." So Samson said to them, "From the eater came something to eat. From the strong one came something to sweet. For 3 days they couldn't solve the riddle. On the fourth day they said to Samson's wife, "Trick your husband into solving the riddle for us. If you don't, we'll burn you and your family to death. Did the two of you invite us just to make us poor?" So Samson's wife cried on his shoulder. She said, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You gave me my friends a riddle and didn't tell me the answer." Samson replied, "I haven't even told my father and mother, so why should I tell you?" She cried on his shoulder for the rest of the 7 days of the party. Finally, on the seventh day, he told her the answer because she made his life miserable. And she told her friends the answer to the riddle. So before sundown on the seventh day, the men of the city said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than the lion?" Samson replied, "If you hadn't used my cow to plow, you wouldn't know my riddle now." When the Lord's Spirit came over him, he went to Ashkelon and killed 30 men there. He took their clothes and gave them to the men who solved the riddle. He was angry, and he went to his father's house. Samson's wife was given to his best man. So then we close this chapter with the account of this riddle. So part of the wedding feast, they have 30 of their friends, and Samson gives them a riddle. A riddle basically, from the eater came something to eat, from the strong one came something sweet. And they don't get it, because who would guess? Oh, honey from a dead lion's body. That's not where you get honey. That's not a combination we guess. And so they were having trouble with it, so they threatened his wife into betraying him. And his wife gives in. What a way to start marriage, right? Your first week of marriage, and your wife sells you out. Your wife, who is from a different people, sells you out and shows her loyalty is not with you and your people, but with her own people. Her interest isn't with Samson, her interest is with her people, the Philistines. So Samson has this line, "If you hadn't used my cow, if you hadn't used my heifer to plow," it's a feminine version of cow, "you wouldn't know my riddle now." We kind of get an interesting, it makes sense what he's saying. We'll just say that. And then how is he going to repay these 30 men? Well, the Lord's Spirit comes over him and he kills 30 men from Ashkelon. He takes their clothes for the dead men and he gives it to the men who had solved his puzzle. They hadn't gone there in an honorable way. And the Lord is at work here, beginning to work against the Philistines. And the first thing he does is he gives the clothes of dead men. And then we have this last verse here. Samson's wife was given to his best man. And this wasn't by Samson's willing. As we're going to see in the next chapter, Samson is still considering her his wife. But her family, her people, give her away. They break that covenant of marriage between the two. Because you got to remember, this isn't like modern day marriage. This is a marriage between two groups of people, two tribes, two clans. And it's a big deal. And her side cuts it off. So today we kind of see the building action of Samson with the Philistines. Over and over again, we see Samson's an interesting guy. And God is using him to begin to work against the Philistines. So God lets him find an attractive young Philistine woman, basically fall in love at first look, marry her, and then he's beginning to use Samson to cause a rift. And we're going to see that rift continue to build as we see Samson become judge tomorrow. I would encourage you to continue to think about how God uses us and his gifts of the Spirit, and we'll continue digging into this story of Samson tomorrow. Have a great day, Mount Calvary.